Alright, Section 5, Power Cylinder Power Assembly. Contents. Component by component removal, unit removal, component by component installation, unit installation, adjusting hydraulic lasher, adjuster, timing injector, crab nutness, tightness, surface retorquing, surface status, specifications, equipment, test. Alright, description. Section 2, 3, and 4 with contain the information of cylinder head, piston, connection rod, and cylinder liner, respectively. Procedures are provided in these sections for disassembly, assembly of the power assembly components beyond this is done during removal from the installation into the engine. Also, the information concerning the cleaning, inspection, qualification components is detailed in these sections. Following procedure are the removal of the installation cylinder power assembly component by component, the removal of the installation of the power assembly unit, the component by component removal after draining the cooling system, remove the top of the deck cover, the affected cylinder as advised, the remove of the latches first, then the rear latches. Remove the airbox, oil pan, handhold covers for the cylinder being removed and opposing cylinder with the other side of the engine. Remove the piston cooling oil pipe. Move the bolts holding the water inlet tube of the cylinder inlet and liner. Remove the cylinder strap nuts for the tube of the water manifold. Remove the gasket and water manifold. Open all cylinder test valves using the test valve wrench. This will facilitate the manual barring of the engine. When removing the fork rod assembly, bar the engine over until the piston is 120 degrees after top dead center. This allows the removal of the basket halves and connection rod bearing shells at one crank pin position. Loosen the cylinder test valve packing nut. Remove the cylinder test valve and seal in the tire of the test valve. The assembly must be removed before removal of the head and damage to the head and or test valve will occur. Disconnect with the rocker arm with the oil line camshaft bearing. Bearing block. Also disconnect the opposite cylinder of opposite bank. Remove the gasket between the oil lines and the blocks. Show the Kansas bearing block at the bolt and ear rocker arm oil line. Rocker arm oil line removal. Loosen the lock nuts with the exhaust valve, rocker arms, injector rocker arm. Back off of the adjusting screws and about 2 complete turns with the around the 30 rocker arms. Remove the rocker arm shaft nut washers with the rocker arm shaft cam, figure 5-2. Test, take off the rocker arm shaft assembly, rocker arm, take care of not to drop the rocker arm. Remove the rocker arm shaft support valve with the bridge assembly. No further breakdown of the valve bridge assembly. Refer to the exhaust valve bridge assembly in section 2. Remove the fuel line assembly, figure 5-3. Also remove the fuel line with the opposite cylinder on the opposite bank of the engine. Care should be taken. The cylindrical seats of the fuel line are not scratched, nicked, at this could cause leakage. Remove the injector adjusting link assembly by removing 2 spring retainers and 2 clevis pins. 16. Remove the injector crab, stud, nut, cylindrical washer, and injector. Shows 2 show the rocker arm assembly removal, shaft nut and shaft cap. Alright, figure 5-3 shows your fuel line assembly removal. Fuel line assembly, fuel line mounting nut, and injector crab nut. Using the injector pry bar, figure 5-4 to remove the injector with the tapered weld from the cylinder head. Protect the injector with the dirt and damage. Using the injector holding rack, move the cylinder head over speed trip of the assembly with the usually interfere with the removal over the head. Rock arm shaft assembly of the rock arms injector opposite cylinder, opposite bank of the engine also should be removed. It is not necessary to remove the overspeed trip assembly from the cylinder. Figure 5 shows removing the injector pry with the pry bar. Place the position tool, figure 5-5, with the injector well opposite cylinder, opposite of the bank of the engine, and thread the rod into the piston. Pull the eyeball hole crown of the piston. Figure 5-5 shows the piston hole in the tube. Remove the cylinder head of the line over the stud nuts and washers. Remove the crab nuts and the crab bolts using the torque multiplier set with the equivalent place for the drive socket with the crab nut with the knot to be removed, the anchor with the crab nut above and below the crab nut to be removed, the position with the multiplier set for the output over the drive socket. Install the air motor with the pressure between 45 to 50 psi. Squeeze the air valve with the crab nut shut hose the brake loose. If the wrench stalls out, increase the air pressure until the crab breaks loose. After removing all the crabs and place that protectors over the crab bolts. Be sure the head puller and holes located in 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock position on the head are free of dirt and oil. Instead of the cylinder head, remove the figure 5-6. Make sure that the bottom bolts are bottom to support the weight of the head. Figure 5-6 shows the cylinder head removing fixture. Break the cylinder head free with the line of turning the jack screws with the working first one side and then the other until the head is broken free of the liner. Use a suitable lifting device. Remove the head. Replace the cylinder head carrying basket having such wooden disc with the bottom of the protect with the machine fire face being next to the scratch. Note the further breakdown of the cylinder head with the exhaust valve with the spring removal. In section 2, place the lifting device in the head, remove the fixture, remove the cylinder head and the seat ring, move the disc out of the cylinder head to the liner water seal within the head of the liner gasket, install the piston pulling eye bolt with a threaded head hole and crown with a piston bolt. Piston and hand tighten. Excessive pressure with the thread hole by it may cause damage to the crown area. If the power assembly contain a blade rod is to be changed out with the following steps applied. With the opposite fork rod will have then to be held out of the way the blade rod can be removed. Remove the lower basket bolts using nuts using the spring-loaded basket bolt wrench figure 5-7 and a ratchet and extension. Note rod assembly from the engine clearly shows the tool. Show the figures 5-7 show the basket bolt wrench and application fork rod basket and basket basket wrench. Alright, moving the upper bolts for the inboard basket half, remove the bolts for the other basket half while holding the basket lower and connection rod with the bearing shell. Move the bolt in the basket bearing while maintaining some of the same relatively upright positions for preventing the dropping of the bearing shell or the basket into the oil pan. Install the connection rod position clamp on the blade rod, but the clamp should fit up far enough with the blade rod so that when the rod is lifted, it will not strike the cylinder line. Use a suitable lifting device, raise the piston. Fork rod assembly apply with the fork rod support with a figure 5-9. Outboard support with a fork rod using figure 2 basket bolts. Rotate the crankshaft in normal direction so that the support will rest in the oil pan. Protect the upper bearing and continuation rotation of the position of the blade rod from removal. Lift the position blade rod assembly until the protective boot can be applied. Remove the upper and connecting rod shell. Figure 5-8 shows the connecting rod piston position clamp application fork rod support. 42 guide the blade rod assembly. Remove it from the engine. Note that the further disassembly with the connection rod assembly refer to figure 3. If the power assembly containing a fork rod is to be changed out with the following steps applied with the addition with steps 1 through 38. Use a suitable lifting device ready for the piston fork rod assembly and then so the dowels on the fork rod clear the dowel holes in the upper connection rod bearing and the inboard ends of the fork. Contact the bearing. If the fork rod lifted for the upper connection rod bearing should be held in place for the opposite side of the engine. 44. Lift the piston blade rod assembly so that the piston hold tool for the figure 5-5 can be positioned to hold the piston and rod at the top of the liner. The upper bearing should be removed as the piston and blade rod assembly is being raised. Install the position clamp of the fork rod applied with the protective boot. 46. The fork rod assembly removed from the engine. Note with the further disassembly connection rod assembly of the refer to section 3. Place the cylinder liner lifter over the liner studs. Secure with its stud nuts. After touching the device, remove the liner from the engine. Unit removal. The complete cylinder power assembly consists of the head valve, the liner, pistons, rings, piston pins, bearing, inserts, carrier, thrust washer, snap ring, connection rod in the basket on the fork rod assembly. Note, locomotive long hood need not to be removed to change the cylinder power assembly if the hoist is used. A draining of the cooling system, remove the top of the deck, come over the effective cylinders, and a joist to remove from the latches. This is the rear latches. Alright, 2. Remove the airbox oil pan hole covers over the cylinder that have been removed opposing the cylinder on the opposite side of the engine. 3. Remove the piston cooling oil pipe. 4. Remove the bolt over the water inlet tube. Cylinder liner. Remove the saddle strap and nuts holding the tube to the water manifold. 5. Remove the gasket from the water manifold. 6. Open the cylinder test valve using the test valve with a wrench. This will facilitate manual barring of the engine. 7. When removing the assembly of the fork rod with the bar engine over until the piston is 120 degrees after the top dead center with it being removed, will allow the removal of the basket half with the connection rod bearing shelf with the one crank pin position. Loosen the cylinder test valve with the packing nut. Remove the test cylinder test valve with the seal with the entire test valve with the assembly must be removed before the removal of the cylinder and damage to the header test valve will occur. Disconnect the rocker arm line with the figure 5-1 with the camshaft bearing black with the disconnect with the line open cylinder opposite cylinder with the opposite bank. Remove the gasket between the oil line and the clamp blocks. Loosen the lock nuts with the exhaust valve rocker arms injector rocker arm after it has been accomplished. Back off with the adjusting screw with the 3 rocker arms. Remove the rocker arm shaft nut with the washer rocker arm shaft caps figure 5-2. Take off the rocker arm shaft assembly rocker arms. Take care not to drop the rocker. 14. Remove the rocker arm support valve with the bridge assembly. 14. Remove the fuel assembly line, figure 5.3. Also remove the fuel line with the opposite cylinder with the opposite bank of the engine. Care should be taken of the CF seats over the fuel line not to be scratched or nicked that could cause leakage. Remove the injector adjusting link by the remove of the 2 springs, retainers, and the 2 clevis. Remove the injector crab, stud nut, cylindrical washer, injector crab. Use the injector pry bar, figure 5.4. Remove the injector from the tapered well in the cylinder head will protect the injector from the dirt and damage by using the injector holding rack. 18. Remove the cylinder head overspeed trip and assembly with the usually interfere with the cylinder. Remove the rocker arm shaft and the rocker arms over the injector opposite cylinder. Opposite bank of the cylinder of the engine should also be removed if not necessary. Remove the overspeed trip assembly from the cylinder. 20. Remove the lower basket bolt nut using the spring-loaded basket bolt wrench, figure 5.7, the ratchet extension. Remove the upper bolts with the inboard basket half. 22. Remove the bolts with the outer basket while holding the basket lower connection rod bearing shelf. 22. Remove the basket bearing while maintaining the same relatively upright position, preventing the dropping of the bearing shell or the basket into the oil pan. Install the connection rod, positioning the clamp onto the rod with the far enough so that when the rod is lifted, it will not strike the cylinder liner. If the power assembly containing the blade rod is to be removed, the following steps apply. Screw the position holding tool with the figure 5.5 into the thread hole of the crown with the piston of the fork with the rod assembly. Use suitable lifting device to raise with the fork rod assembly. Apply with the fork rod support figure 5.9 while holding the upper bearing shell in place. Rotate the crankshaft in the normal directions to support the rest of the oil pan. Protect the upper bearing and continue rotation for the position of the blade of the rod from the removal. Remove the crab nuts for the crab bolts using the air torque multiplier set or equivalent plate for the drive socket over the crab nut to be removed. The anchor of the crab nut above and below the crab nut to be removed. The position of the multiplier so the output is set over the drive socket. Install the air mounter with the set the air pressure between 40 to 50 psi. Squeeze the air valve and the crab nut should break loose. If the wrench stalls out, then increase the air pressure until the crab nut breaks loose. After removing all the crabs, place the thread protectors over the crab bolts. Alright, 5.10 shows your lifting clamp application. Figure 5.11 piston holding tool application. After attaching the lifting clamp, figure 10.5.10, the cylinder may be removed. Screw in the piston holding tool, figure 5.11. If the hoist is set, figure 5.12, disregard the lifting clamp of the piston holding tube. Lift the piston holding tool. Remove upper bearing shuffle. Continue raising the piston and blade rod assembly with the piston holding tool can be secured with the hold the assembly of the top of the liner. Alright, your power assembly hoist setup application here. The overhead chain of the hoist with the lifting of the clamp attached to the hoist set with the guiding with the power assembly. Remove it from the engine. If the power assembly containing the fork rod is to be removed, the following step apply with additions step 1 through 24. Screw the piston holding tool with the threaded hole in the crown of the piston blade rod assembly. Remove the crab nuts with the crab bolts with the use of the air pull torque multiplier set or the equivalent plate for the drive socket with the crab nut to be removed. The anchor with the crab nut below the lobe of the crab nut to be removed. The piston of the multiplier of the output is over the drive socket with the air motor and set pressure between the 45 to 50 psi with the squeeze of the air valve of the crab nut should break loose. If the wrench stalls out, increase the air pressure until the crab nut breaks loose. After removing all the crab thread protectors over the crab bolts, attach the lifting clamp of the cylinder by being removed and screwing the piston hold the tool. Note if the hoist is used, the figure 5.12 to disregard the lifting clamp of the piston holding tool. Lifting the piston holding tube while holding the upper bearing shelf. Continue raising until the piston holding tool can be secured with the hold of the assembly with the top of the liner. Alright, figure 5.13 shows the piston holding rod assembly. Figure 2.22.11.5 lifting clamp and the hoist. Install the connection rod positioning on the clamp of the fork rod. Lift the blade rod assembly, remove the upper bearing shelf and 42 after overhead chain hoist to the lifting of the clamp, figure 5.13. Attach the hoist set with the figure 5.12 with the guide with the power assembly, remove it from the engine. Your component by component installation. The power assembly with the components to be installed should be either new or remanufactured or otherwise qualified parts of the project. Competent installation of the crankcase, upper, lower, and pilot board should be checked. The dimensions should be within tolerance shown with the surface data page of the section 4. In this case, the lower board and the dimensions taken from the lower liner bore insert installed with the remove of the manufacturer liner and piston and use of the piston with the limited clearance will have to be measured for the described and surface tab of the page section 3. One, place a clean inspected position piston on the clean workbench. Apply the spring-loaded oil control ring into the bottom of the groove. Apply the spring groove at the first using the spring piston ring and expander. So apply with the ring so the spring will fit in the groove of the ring with the ends of the spring with 180 degrees from the ring gap. Rings that are marked on the top on the one side of the ring are placed in the groove of this marking, making the facing of the crown and of the position. Be sure the spring fully sheathed with the groove of the back of the ring, attempting to install the piston of the ring assembly into the liner of the spring not fully sheathed with the loop of the spring protruding between the ring groove and the ring will result in the bad kinked spring or broken ring. Using a ring expander, apply the double hook scraper oil control ring in the next groove up. Apply the compression rings, pistons being bottom compression ring with the ending of the number 1 compression ring, figure 514. A ring on the top groove only must be installed with the number 1 compression groove only. Figure 514 shows the installation of the top compression ring. The compression rings may be staggered so that the gaps of the first and second rings are 180 degrees to each other, with a third and 90 degrees to the second ring, when the fourth ring 180 degrees to the third. The oil control ring gaps should be 180 degrees to each other. If a new position piston pin is to be used, the new bearing insert must be installed. Carefully wipe out the insert slot with the care of examine the bearing of the install and the insert. Make sure that it is clean. Apply with the bearing insert one end of the carrier slide against the carrier bore. If the new bearing insert is not to be used, the old bearing insert must be applied with the same relative position from which it was removed. Center the bearing and insert with the tangs and when bent within the adjacent counterbores of the carrier to prevent endwise movement. 11. Using the indenter tool, the figure 515, strike the center of the tire tangs to bend the carrier counterbore. It shows your piston bearing counter. Insert installation. Examine all mating surfaces of the carrier piston with the piston bearing insert with the connection rod to be sure that they are clean and smooth. Minimally coat the carrier with the being insert with the piston pin with a clean oil to insert the pin into the carrier. Rotate the pin while moving it slowly across the bearing insert with the check the freedom of the movement. Install the piston pin with a small identification hole with the end of the pin at the same with the end of the piston cooling inlet hole for the carrier will reuse the components that they must be kept in the same relative position. Play for the carrier assembly with the control carrier holding fixture figure 516 secure with a T handle. 516 shows the carrying holding fixture. Lubricate the piston pin bolt with the Texaco Thread X number 2303 piston connection rod with the piston pin. Apply with the piston pin bolt assembly. Tighten bolt snugly to 10 foot-pounds. Perform a finger tightness check if the spacer can be rotated to twist after applied with the finger grip as a whole. As a bolt assembly should be removed and inspected with the cowl with not clamping. When assembling the rod and the carrier, assembly the piston cooling oil of the carrier must be on the same side of the dowel pin serrations of the fork rod with the blade rod with the side with the low toe. This will ensure the proper position of the hole was an assembly installed with the engine using the 300-foot capacity with the torque wrench extension for the torque with the piston pin bolt, the torque with the bolts. 400 foot-pounds of the torque reading of 300 foot-pounds is required by using the extension of the spacer. Should again be given a finger tightness check with after the bolts are tight. Place the piston rings and assembly with on the workbench and open end up. Check if the interior is clean with the platform and street with any of the foreign material. Apply some clean oil with the platform. Place the thruster washer and platform. Apply with the clean oil with the thrust washer. 24. Carefully place the carrier rod assembly into the piston. Check with the assembly for the free rotation of the piston. 25. With the snap the ring tool position of the piston. Snap the ring until figure 517. 517 shows installing the piston snap ring, and then check for the snap ring to clearance for the not exceeding 25 thousandths of a foot. Or is that an inch? Perform pre-installation inspection cylinder and liner and inspect the liner water seal with the counter bore with the nicks and they cut with the water with the seal to make sure the counter bores and the liner bore are clean. Clean the water inlet tube with the deflector with the correct type with the properly fitted with the position of the cylinder or liner. Wipe the inside of the liner clean with the oil cloth. Apply the liner lifter figure 518 with over the liner stud secure with stud nuts. Linear installation using a linear lifter. Liner installation using liner and lifter. If that's a suitable device with the liner lifter and raise slightly, we install the lower liner marked with the electric motor division PA with the upper groove with the install of the lower liner seal with the mark with the EMDVIT. red paint and lower the groove with a counter seal with approve of the lubricant. Lower the cylinder and then lower the cylinder liner into play for the crankcase bore. Preliminary arrangement between can be obtained with the position pilot stud with the liner over the 5 o'clock position. Place the piston ring with the compressor for the guide over the stud of the cylinder liner with the oil of the ring compressor for the protective boot with the end of the connection rod. Position the piston rod assembly over the bore with the manually spread with the film of the oil over the outside of the piston. Check with the ring gap of the position have not changed. Lower the piston with the rod assembly into the liner. Make sure that the serial number of the rod is facing outward. Lower the assembly with the piston crown with the parallel to the top of the liner. Outside oil with the inside outside surface of the connection rod bearing shelved in place of the upper bearing with the position connection rod journal. Hold the bearing shelf within the lower of the blade rod to resist of the upper bearing surface of the applicable to remove the piston holding tool. Note, the blade and fork rod opposite of the rod with the install with the position out of the way during the component by component removal by using piston holding tool with the blade rod with the fork rod support with figure 5.9. If applicable, to remove the fork rod support and the lower fork rod until the rod makes contact with the bearing surface of the fork rod dowel should enter the bearing dowel holes without binding. Be sure the serial number of the basket matches the serial number of the connection rod figure 519. 519 shows the rod and basket identification numbers, rod serial number, the basket serial number. Apply a lower connection bearing of the dowel basket half on the bearing surface of the place with the half of the fork rod. Apply with the fork rod baskets. Be sure that the serial numbers and prongs of the dowel half is on the dowel side of the rod. Lubricate all the upper basket bolts with the Texaco Thread X2303 with the tighten the upper basket fork rod bolts just enough to make the serrations to hold the bearing in place. Apply the other basket half on the fork rod. Tighten the rod bolts enough to make the serrations. Apply the lower basket bolts and washer and lock nuts. Snug four top basket bolts approximately 10 foot-pound with a firmly meshed with serration. Give each washer a finger tightness check. If the washer can be rotated, grasping it with the fingers, the bolt assembly should be removed and inspected with so that it's caused not clamping. Use a spring-loaded basket bolt wrench figure 5.7. Torque of the lower basket bolts at 75 foot-pounds. Torque the upper basket bolts at 190 foot-pounds. Perform a finger tightness check over the washer. Remove the connection rod piston positioning clamp of the piston, holding the tool for the blade rod assembly over the opposite bank of the engine. Disconnect the lifting device from the eyeball. Remove the piston ring compressor with the guide with the engine. Remove the piston pulling eyeball. Install the liner head with the water seal with the heat dam insulators. Install the headliner gasket figure 520 with the ensure the proper gasket is used, but the gasket is being placed over the linear stud over the part of the number E electric motor division top 645. Stamping face up over the notch ear over the gasket is placed over the pilot stud of the liner. Test the head fixture of the lifting device to the head with the partially raised of the head. Check whether the injector is well covered. Note all the head time and the head of the insulation exhaust valve has already been applied with the head of the insulation. Refer to the exhaust valve installation section 2. Apply the light-coated silicone grease with the water outlet elbow seals and install the two brown seal with the grooves entering the crankcase with the red seal with the grooves between the elbow and the cylinder bolt head of the below. Bolt the elbow with the cylinder head with the torque of the specified value. Show that the notch holes goes over the pilot studs. The headliner gasket. Check for the bottom of the surface of the head is clean with the place of the seal ring with the figure 521 on the head of the making sure the chamfer side is facing up. Figure 521 shows cylinder head seating ring notch and the chamfer. 59. Lower the head slowly with the into the position, making sure the notch is seating on the ring at 6 o'clock position. 60. Line up with the water discharge elbow. With a mating hole with a crankcase figure 522, but be careful to seal with the damage and twist it within the grooves while the head is lowering into the position. Before the head's contact the liner, check with the position with the seat ring notches. Finish the lower end with the head. Remove the head of the fixture lifting devices. Figure 522 shows the water discharge elbow or alignment. Apply the Texaco Thread X number 2303 cylinder liner instead of the stud nut. Apply the liner and washer stud nuts and snug them down. Follow the sequence of the shown figure 523. Torque the heads of the liner nuts to 75 foot-pounds. Remove the thread protectors. Make sure for the crab nose bolts and crab seats. Crab nuts are free with the burrs and lubricated with the Texaco Thread X number 2303. Apply crabs and crab nuts and center of the crab bolts with manually seating with the nuts while moving the crab bolts back and forth. After seating with the crabs, then torque them approximately 300 foot-pounds. Check where the crabs are positioned with the wrench can be applied with a headliner to the stud nuts. Figure 523 shows the headliner of the nut sequencing. Tightening the liner studs, nuts, the final torque of 240 pounds, the same sequence as before. Use the air motor torque multiplier power ratio 38 to 1 and mechanical advantage wrench for final torque for the crab nuts at 1,800 foot-pounds at 12 to 1 power wrench used with a 300 foot-pound capacity torque, and the hand torque wrench of the pointer should be indicated with a 150 foot-pounds final pass. Install the overspeed trip mechanism torque of the bolts at 24 foot-pounds. 70. Uncover the injector well with the install of the injector within the cylinder head. Check with the location of the dowel with the properly seated. Lubricate the threads injector stud with the nuts of the place for the injector crab over the crab stud with the place for the cylindrical side of the washer into the cylindrical seat of the crab. Apply the snugs down over the nut. Be sure the injector crab is cocked at an angle that would prevent entry with the injector timing tool with the torque of the crab nut at 50 foot-pounds. Install with the injector adjusting linkage assembly with the 2 clevis bend spring retainer 74. Attach them to fuel manifold top deck cover frame. Connect the fuel lines with the manifold. The injector care must be taken not to damage cylindrical seat of the fuel lines that the fuel leakage could occur. 75. Position the valve bridge in the cylinder head at the time of the installation valve bridge are in assembly with the build up of the valve bridge and hydraulic glass adjuster section 2. 76. Lubricate the shaft and stud nuts for the Texaco Thread X2303. Install the rack arm shaft assembly. Figure 5, whatever. Apply shaft caps with the short toe facing up. Figure 524 show the rocker arm shaft installation. Make sure the hardened washers use them between the rocker arm shaft nuts and shaft caps. All contact surfaces clean with the free of the burrs and apply with the washer and nut with the shaft studs. Alternately torque the shaft nuts at 100 foot-pounds. The first path with the final torque at 300 foot-pounds. The new gasket attached to the rocker arm in line with the camshaft bearing bracket. Refer to the procedure section. Injector timing, adjusting hydraulic glass, adjusting coating of the new seal with the dowel for silicone grease, place for the groove in the liner end of the water inlet tube. Figure 525. Piston saddle strapped around with the water manifold so that through the inlet tube and flange. Shows the 5525 shows the applying the seal of the water inlet tube. After the strap nuts have been applied with a tightened finger torque, check that the seal is seated with the groove of the position, the tube on the finer and finger tighten the bolts. Take the new gasket and shape of the fit around with the water manifold, then shove the gasket between the tube flange of the manifold, making sure that the sides of the gasket are flush with the side of the flange, end of the gasket are within the clamping radius of the flange. Torque the strap nuts at 15 foot-pounds. Prior to torquing the tube of the liner bolts, remove the bolts of the washer of the flange of the tube of the move of the repositioning of the water manifold. The new movement to detect for the tube of the liner bolt of the washer must be reapplied with a torque of 350 pounds. New gasket placing a piston cooling oil with the piston against the piston cooling oil manifold. Place the nozzle over the pipe of the liner, bore with the dowels of the pipe aligning with the dowel holes in the liner, and the bolts either in holes in either flange do not line with the place of the pipe. No attempt should be made with the fit of the pipe by bending it. This would place a stress on the piping, which could result in a subsequent failure. Install the fine threaded bolts into the manifold, cords of the thread holes bolts into the liner, torque the bolts of the 20 foot-pounds, check proper alignment with the piston cooling oil pipe, placing the alignment gauge for the nozzle over the pipe, figure 525, 526. Bar over the engine, bottom dead center with the cylinder being checked, at the same time rotate the gauge to make sure it does not bind the carrier hole. Figure 526 shows the piston cooling oil pipe, and then the piston carrier. Alignment must be gauged and enter the passage, turning them freely from them without binding. Alright, that shows the figure 526, your piston cooling oil pipe alignment. And the gauge indicate 91, and if the gauge indicates the misalignment, replace the pipe, but do not use the gauge to align with the pipe. Important 92, important to the after installation assembly. Determine the heads of the piston cleaner for the will provide information necessary to evaluate the amount of subsequent wear to change the head of the piston relation to proceed with applying with the lead wear of the wire holder and the fowls. Place the length with the 1/8 of the diameter lead wire at each end of the wire holder, position the holder on the top of the piston, same side as the one being checked in the engine. Each end of the wire should be at least 1/8 of an inch outside of the diameter of the piston bar. The engine over the piston being checked at the bottom of the dead center. Apply with the lead wire holder for the inliner portion. Liner port position at the top of the piston so that the parallel is with the crankshaft. Bar the engine over one complete revolution. Compress the lead wire. Remove the wire from the engine. Measure for the inboard portion of the both compressed ends of the wire. Figure 527 shows the wood wire measurement. You have your measurement here, and then it is important the thinner over the two compressed area of the measure to provide the minimum piston head clearance. With a maximum clearance and minimum clearance, the difference of micrometer indications between the two compressed ends should not exceed 5 thousandths of an inch. If it does, then repeat the process for the wire may have the changed position. If the difference is still greater than 5 thousandths of an inch after the second reading, change out with the power assembly. Place the new packing and seal with the cylinder tested valve. Bore and install the valve body packing nut. Tighten the valve body into the cylinder head and set it snug down the packing nut. Alright, torque the packing nut at 65 foot-pounds. Install the NEA valve. Refill the cooling system. Check for water leaks. Install the top deck with the hand hole. Cover the bar engine over the complete revolution. Close the cylinder test valve. Start the engine. Ready for the water temperature of the 170 degrees Fahrenheit. With the running of the engine, shut it down. Recheck the torque of the crab liner stud nuts. Also recheck the oil and water leaks. Unit installation. Left and right banks of the engine. Determine the looking toward from the front end of the governor end of the engine, which will stand at the rear of the coupling end of the engine. The power assembly with the blade rods installed with the right bank with the long toe over the slipper foot, facing the center of the engine. Cylinder of the assembly fork rods installed with the left bank. The complete power assembly is packaged in either storage type of the metal or the reinforced container. Figure 528 with expandable cardboard wood container. Metal cover of the storage type of the container is removed with the using the wrench of the torquing on the hex head fasteners in. Side over the container, the cover forms the top and three sides of the container. Figure 528 shows your power assembly and container. Remove the card containing with the applicable seal with the gasket for the power assembly with the fork rod with the small box contained with the basket bolts. Remove the two nuts of the bolts holding the top of the mounting bracket and mounting block with the rock arms stud with the takeoff of the block. Remove the piston holding bolt and block. Install the clean rag injector with the well with remove the tape from the around the liner port 6. If the power assembly has a fork rod, remove the connection rod basket for the metal bracket in front over the container. Figure 528. The assembly has been coated to the anti-rust compound, which does not have any to be removed. The anti-rust compound, which does not have to be removed. The total with compatible with lube oil. Install the rock arm shaft support. Make sure that the locking dowel holes are properly positioned. Install the lifting clamp. Figure 529. Secure it with the rock arm shaft nuts. Figure 529. Lifting clamp application. If the hoist set is you disregard the reference for the using of the lifting clamp of the position, hold the tool power assembly being installed. 10. Remove the rag with the injector well. Apply with the piston holding tool. Figure 530. 530 shows the piston holding tool application. Even the hoist setting attach the clean hoist to the eye with the center of the lifting clamp. Remove the power assembly from the container. Support the assembly with suitable stand. Attach the connection rod position clamp. 13. Be sure to check that the fork rod and the rod with the basket serial matches. Number figure 531. 531 rod and basket identification. And then you have your 14. Before applying with the water discharge elbow, inspect the internal and external steel grooves. Apply the light cool silicone grease water inlet with the elbows. Install the two gray-brown seal with the grooves entering with the crankcase and with the red seal with the groove between the elbow and the cylinder head. Below the bolt elbow with the cylinder head, torque the specified value, clamp the hoist over the engine with the lifting over the clamp of the position with the proper angle with the installation of the engine. Figure 532 shows the power assembly installation with the lifting device for the clamping hoist. Raise the assembly and install the lower liner seal with the mark for the electric motor division PA with the upper groove with the install of the lower seal with the electric motor division VIT with red paint with the lower groove with the coat the seal with the approved lubricant. Place the sealing ring and assembly. Figure 523. Make sure that the chamfered side is facing up with the notch of 6 o'clock position. Plate with the red protector of the cylinder head crab bolts. Lower the assembly slowly with the crankcase bore lining up the water discharge elbow with the mating hole with the crankcase. Figure 534. Carefully sealing or not damaged or twisted in the grooves while the head is lowered into the position. Figure 533 shows your seating ring, and Figure 534 shows your water discharge elbow alignment. Before the head contact with the crankcase, recheck with the position seat ring and the notch. Lower the assembly with the final position. Remove the chain hoist with the lifting clamp and attach the position holding tool with the power assembly being installed. Note the blade and fork opposite with the rod and power assembly is being installed with this position out of the way. Removal using the piston holding tool. Oil inside and outside the surface connection for the rod bearing shells and place for the upper bearing in position for the connection rod journal with holding the bearing shell placed for the lower blade with the rest of the upper bearing surface. Lower the fork rod until the rod makes the contact with the bearing surface. Fork rod dowel should enter the bearing dowel holes without binding. Remove the hoist set with remove the piston holding of the tool, lifting of the clamp, placing the cleaning rag on the injector well. Remove the connection rod assembly clamp of the connection rod. each connection rod. After removing the piston holding tube of the opposite cylinder, apply the lower connection rod bearing the down half basket half of the oil of the bearing surface in place of the basket half of the fork rod, applying the fork rod basket to be sure of the serial of the number of the prong of the dowel half of the dowel side of the rod. Lubricate oil all upper basket bolts of the Texaco thread X number 2303. Trim the upper basket with the fork rod bolts just enough to make serrations to hold the bearing in place. For the apply the upper other basket half of the fork rod, tightening the rod bolts enough to make the serrations. Apply with the lower bolt basket with the washer with the locker nuts snug. Four top basket bolts approximately 10 foot-pounds of fine mesh serrations given each washer finger tightness check. If the washer can be rotated, graph the fingers where the bolt assembly should be removed with the inspector with the collar of the knot clamping. Use the spring-loaded basket bolt wrench in figure 535. The torque lower the basket bolts to 75 foot-pounds. Figure 535 shows the basket bolt wrench and application fork rod basket bolt wrench. The torque upper basket at 195 foot-pounds before perform a finger for test. Tightness testing under the washer. Remove the thread protected to make sure the crab bolts for the crab seat with the crab nuts free of the burrs and lubricated with the Texaco thread X2303. Apply with the crab and nuts and center of the crab bolts on the manual setting. And seating the nuts while moving the crab bolts back and forth. After seating the crab nuts, torque them to approximately 300 foot-pounds. Check the crab nuts position so the wrench can be applied with the head liner to the stud. Check the head of the liner stud. Nut torque at 240 foot-pounds of torque, setting with the pilot stud with the using the tightening sequence figure 523. Use the air motor torque multiplier portion ratio 38 to 1 with the mechanical advantage wrench. Finally, torque the crab null to 1,800 foot-pounds and 12 to 1 power wrench used for a 300 foot-pound capacity hand torque wrench. The pointer should indicate 150 foot-pounds for the final pass. Install the overspeed trip of the mechanism, torque the bolts over the 24 foot-pounds. Uncover the injector well, install the injector into the cylinder head. Check the location of the dowel and it is proper seated. 40. Lubricate with the threads, injector studs, nut for the place of the injector crab over the crab side, place for the cylindrical side of the washer, cylindrical seat of the crab, apply the strings of the nut, down on the nut. Be sure the injector crab is not cocked at an angle so that it would prevent the entry of the injector timing tool with the torque of the crab nut with its 50 foot-pounds. Install the injector adjusting link with the assembly with the two clevis pin with the spring retainer 4-3 connecting the fuel lines with the manifold with the injector. Careful must be taken the damage of the cylindrical seat of the fuel line with the fuel leakage of the could occur. Position of the valve bridge with the cylinder time. Cylinder head at the time of the installation, valve bridge of the assembly with the build up of the valve bridge, hydraulic glass adjuster section 2, lubricated shaft studs with the Texaco thread X of the 2303, installed with the rocker arm shaft, assembly figure 524. Apply the shaft caps of the short for toe facing out. Measure the hardened washer if used is used between the rocker arm and the shaft nut for the shaft caps and all contact surfaces are clean and free of the burrs. Apply the washer nuts to the shaft stud. Alternate torque shaft nuts at 100 foot-pounds on the first pass and final torque at 300 foot-pounds of torque. On that new gasket attached with the rocker arm oil line with a camshaft bearing bracket. Refer to the procedure section with the injector timing. Just for hydraulic lashers, contact the new seal with the dowel 4 silicone grease placed with the groove at the liner edge of the water inlet tube. Position saddle strapped around with the water manifold then through the inlet tube of the flange, figure 51. After the strap nuts have been applied with the tight and finger tight, check the seal is seated with the groove position of the tube on the liner and finger tighten the bolts. 52. Take a new gasket and make a new gasket shape of the fit around with the water manifold and shift the gasket between the tube flange and manifold, making sure the side of the gasket are flush with the side of the flange. The ends of the gasket are within the clamping radius of the flange. Torque the strap nuts at 15 foot-pounds of torque 54 for prior to torquing the tube of the liner bolt of the remove the bolt of the washer of the flange. If the tube of the move at the reposition with the water manifold movement of the detector, the tube of the liner bolt washer may be reapplied with a 350 foot-pounds. Use a new gasket for the placing the piston cooling oil pipe against the piston cooling oil manifold. Place the nozzle end of the pipe with the liner bore with the silver the dowels of the pipe alignment with the dowel holes or liner. If the bolt holes are either on the flanges do not line up with the relief of the pipe, but do not attempting they should be made with a fit with the pipe of the bending it. This would place the stress on the pipe that could result in the subsequent failure. Install the fine threads of the manifold with the course of the thread bolts of the liner torque bolts at 20 foot-pounds. 59. Check the proper alignment of the piston cooling oil. Place the alignment gauge into the nozzle of the pipe with the figure 526 bar over the engine bottom tap dead center of the cylinder being checked at the same time to rotate the gauge to make sure that it does not bind with the carrier hole. If the gauge indicated the measurement misalignment, replace the pipe. Do not use the gauge into alignment with the pipe. It is important after installing the power assembly to determine the head of the piston clearing to provide the information necessary to evaluate the amount of subsequent wear to chain with the head of the piston relationship procedure. Apply the head lead wire with the wire holder as follows. Use the piston the same side of the one being checked with the engine. Place the length of the 1/8 of an inch diameter lead wire into the end of the wire holder position at the top of the piston. At each end of the wire should be at least 1/8 of an inch off the side of the diameter of the piston bar of the engine over the piston being checked in its bottom center. Apply the lead wire with the liner port position at the top of the piston so over the parallel of the crankshaft bar of the engine over the one complete revolution to compress the lead wire. Remove the wire from the engine and remove the inboard portion of the bottom, both compressed ends of the wire. Figure 536 shows your lead wire measurement. It is important thinner of the two compressed area of the measure of the provide with the minimum piston head clearance. Maximum minimum clearance difference for the micrometer reading should be not exceed 5,000 of an inch. Does not repeat the wire. Process of the wire may have changed position. If the difference is still greater than 5,000 of an inch, after the second reading, check the power assembly. Place the new packing seal with the cylinder test valve of the bore. Install with the valve body packing nut and tighten with the valve body with the cylinder head with it sunk down with the packing nut. Torque the packing nut at 65 foot-pounds. Install with the knee valve. Refuel the cooling system. Check for the water and leaks. Install the top deck of the handhold covers the bar of the engine over the one complete revolution. Close all of the cylinder test valve. Start with the engine. Raise the water temperature to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. After running the engine, you shut it down with a recheck with the retorque with the crab and the liner studs, and recheck the oil and water leaks. Your power assembly packaging. Warning, failure to comply with the proper packaging procedure when returning the power assembly can result in the injury personnel for the costly damage of the component of the container with the power assembly. Ship that has been specially constructed to prevent damage of the component with the properly packaged for the assembly being with the return of the following procedure should be used. For attempting to move the assembly plate for the piston holding block over the injector hole over the injector crab stud with the shear of the bolt head into the thread lifting eye hole in the crown of the piston. After lifting the clamp of the assembly with a hoist with the reposition the assembly shipping the container so that the liner firmly seated the connection rod straddle with the support with the bottom of the container. 4, move the hoist and lifting clamp of the assembly. 5, on the top mounting block over the rocker arm shaft with the stud with the screw of the washer and nuts. Make sure the block of attaching bolts holding the block of the container are secure. 6, on the fork rod assembly, make sure each half of the basket with a properly positioned secure with the main rod with the main body with the container. 7, place the container cover in the position secure. Adjusting the hydraulic lasser, adjusting proper application properly operating last adjuster correctly, setting of the subsequent inspection regular. Maintenance interval is very important to the valve of the operation properly set with a defective lash adjuster caused by the exhaust valve with the subject with the increase of the stress of the leads to the ultimate failure with the probable damage of the engine. After completing with the cylinder with the head power assembly has been installed, the last adjuster must be set with the open cylinder test valve with the rotate with the crankshaft of the piston is at the near top dead center of the cylinder being set. Loosen the rock arm adjusting the screw lock nuts and torque the rock arm screw nuts down until the last valve touches the hydraulic lasher adjuster plunger, or use 1/1000 of an inch shim between the valve tip and the adjuster plunger, then turn down 1/2 turn. Check the valve bridge cylindrical seat to be sure that the spring loaded against the cylinder head spring seat. If the bridge spring seat is not spring loaded against the cylinder head spring seat, turn down the rocker arm adjusting the screw and not until no movement is felt, then turn another quarter turn. Tighten the rocker, adjusting screw lock nut. After running the engine until the lube oil reaches the operating temperature, check the clearance between the last adjuster body end of the valve stem with the piston near the top center. If the clearance is less than minimum, the cylinder head should be removed with a recondition with a rejection. Use the minimum clearance gauge of the 537 with the gauge of the clearance between the last adjuster exhaust valve. The gauge is 1/16 of an inch thick, but it should have the fit between the last adjuster valve with the stem and the top, and to ensure the minimum clearance. Timing into the injector installed with the making the adjustment as follows. See the flywheel is 0 to top dead center of the cylinder being tested, being timed. See the table of 1, section 7 for the top dead center section settings. Figure 537 shows the checking the last adjuster valve clearance, inspecting the job of the injector, timing gauge for the hole will provide with the injector body. Figure 538. 3. Loosen the lock nut, turn the rocker adjusting screws until the shoulder of the gauge passes over the injector follower guide. Note injectors can be timed if the overspeed has been tripped. If they must be first to be reset with the engine crankshaft bar over at least one revolution. Tighten the adjusting screw lock nut while holding the adjusting screw in position with the screwdriver, and then it shows the rocker arm adjusting screw timing injector, and then the gauge. Recheck setting, and then your crab torque tightness check and retorque. All new and replaced power assembly should have the crab nose check for the tightness intervals specified scheduled maintenance program using a torque wrench of 1,800 foot-pounds. Any nuts if the turns at the lower value. If the nut does not turn at 1,800 foot-pounds, do not tighten further. Retorque the crab nuts intervals specified with the scheduled maintenance program. When torquing crab nuts, loosen all nuts one flat and retorque one flat 1,000 foot-pounds and retorque at 1,800 foot-pounds. Your service data for your cylinder power assembly, and then this concludes your section 5 of the electric motor division, section 5 cylinder power assembly testing.